It is time to finish this.
Let's hope this one's a little bit easier to handle. I'm pretty sure my blood pressure in the last one was high enough to fill a truck tire.
And they said, okay, now let's talk about Quran. Now when he said that word, I thought, whoa. I thought, okay, this guy, he wants to convert me now. He wants to make me into a Muslim. It had never crossed my mind before. We were just having a chat about the origins of universe and so on and so forth. And now it hits me that this guy wants to make me a Muslim.
So this Muslim guy brought up God in a conversation and told you he wanted to convince you God was real. He was so into it that he took you to a restaurant with 2 other Muslim dudes and tried to convince you the thing exists. And yet, throughout that whole process, it never once occurred to you that maybe, just maybe, he was trying to convert you? If you say so, man.
So I kind of backed off and I thought, look, it was nice to chat, but that's the end of that.
Oh, that's great, Tim! Get out of there! Run away! Run for your mind!
And then I thought to myself that, look, I embarked on this whole journey trying to find the truth. And now I found something that, I'm just going to deny because it doesn't feel right. I have to check this out. I have to see what they've got to say.
So you feel no compulsion at all to check out if the reasoning you used in the last video to convince yourself that God exists makes any sense at all. And you could only be fucked to take a lazy skim through the summaries of a couple of Wikipedia pages before you decided you had a decent grasp on the origin of the entire universe. But you really, really care about the truth, so you're now gonna completely ignore science and start taking the superstitious babbling of these random Muslims seriously. I guess just because they happen to be conveniently located in your office. Yeah, Tim, you're a real serious truth seeker.
So we started to discuss the Quran. Now, I didn't know much about it at the time. Looking into the Quran, I find that it's not a book. It's a series of verses.
Tim, this is the Quran printed in book format. It can also be put on, say, scrolls, or note cards, or in a PDF, like any other book. Yes, Tim, it's a book.
A series of verses that were revealed in Arabic that were spoken from the mouth of a man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who couldn't even read.
Yep. That'd be why he spoke them, or maybe I should say dictated them, to multiple scribes who wrote down more or less what he said. Oh, and just to people who pretty much remembered what he said and passed it around orally or wrote it down on whatever was available. Let me tell you a couple stories from Sahih Bukhari, which is considered one of the 2 most authentic books of hadith by Sunni Muslims, which I assume you are, since almost all Muslims in the UK are Sunni. Links to the relevant hadith are in the description. So there were these 2 guys, and one of them was reciting a surah from the Quran. When he was done, the other guy grabs him and drags him in front of Muhammad. And he says, "Muhammad, I heard this guy reciting the surah wrong." And so Muhammad says, "You, recite." And that guy recites. And he says, "Yep, that's how it was revealed. Now you recite." And the other guy recites. And Muhammad says, "Yep, that's how it was revealed." The Quran was revealed 7 different ways, so just pick whichever one is easier for you. Yeah, seriously. Muhammad himself admitted there was no definitive version of any of the Quranic verses. They'd been revealed 7 different ways, so you can just pick whichever one you want. To people who are familiar with the story of Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, this is going to sound kind of familiar. He couldn't remember his own bullshit the second time either. And just like Muhammad, when people figured it out, he had to make up some lame-ass excuse to justify it. That's bad, man. It means that even straight out of Muhammad's mouth, there was no definitive version of the Quran. And it is so fucking lazy. I mean, you gotta understand. The Quran was revealed over a period of 23 years. You'd think that would be enough time to get your shit straight and be able to deliver the thing in a consistent way. I mean, it's not even that long. And then during the reign of Abu Bakr, after Muhammad's death, Zayd ibn Thabit, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, don't really care. He was one of Muhammad's scribes, and he had to go around collecting all these scraps of writing and verses that people had been passing along by mouth, and he had to put them together into one manuscript. And that manuscript was just put away, basically. And then later, during the reign of Uthman, it was decided that there was too much variance between the different versions of the Quran in use, and that was causing disagreements. So Zayd's manuscript was translated from the multiple dialects of the scraps he'd collected earlier into the dialect of Quraysh, which was Muhammad's birth tribe, by Zayd and 3 other men, which of course made it even less true to any of the various versions Muhammad originally spat out, having been passed through a different dialect and then back to the original again. And then this version was copied and distributed, and all the other copies of the Quran and Quranic materials were burnt. So yeah, it's true, Muhammad couldn't read or write, but it sure would have been helpful if he could, since then at least the Quran would be his own work, rather than a clusterfuck of translated paper scraps and memories in multiple dialects of the various versions of the verses Muhammad couldn't remember. And so maybe it wouldn't have ever required that degree of editorial interference. But it is what it is.
And the things that this book discusses, the language that it uses, is so powerful and so eloquent, and yet so precise and straight to the point.
You know, not to sound immodest or anything, but I've had people say the same thing about my videos, and half the time I just talk off the cuff. Am I a prophet of God too?
And what is the Quran essentially? That it's not just a series of stories. The Quran is what? It's a book of law.
Yeah, it's definitely not a series of stories. I kind of thought it would be when I started reading it, and that would have been cool because it would have at least been interesting. But instead, the things that pass for stories are basically just, hey, here were some more people who didn't believe in God the right way. Don't be like those unbelieving scumbags. I'm going to torture them. Make sure you do everything Muhammad tells you. And that's basically it.
Have you ever taken a book of law, of British law, off the shelf and start reading it? It's not like the Quran, even in English.
I know. It's a lot less focused on achieving maximum hate density on every single page.
It's official paragraph 1.2.3.
Surah 24, verse 6, verse 7, verse 8, verse 9.
The plaintiff says da-da-da-da. It's like that. It's really official language.
And for those who launch a charge against their spouses and have in support no evidence but their own, their solitary evidence can be received if they bear witness 4 times with an oath by God that they da-da-da-da-da.
Do not go through a red light until it turns green and da-da-da-da-da.
Verse 7, and the 5th oath should be that they solemnly invoke the curse of God on themselves if they tell a lie. Verse 8, but it would avert the punishment from the wife if she bears witness 4 times with an oath by God that her husband is telling a lie. Verse 9, and the 5th oath should be that she solemnly invokes the wrath of God on herself if her accuser is da-da-da-da-da.
But the Quran, the book of law, isn't like this.
No, not at all.
The language within it is so powerful.
Oh, yeah, you mean like this? And don't turn around and say, hey, it's not beautiful in translation, it's beautiful in Arabic. You said even in English.
Those who reject our signs we shall soon cast into the fire. As often as their skins are roasted through, we shall change them for fresh skins, that they may taste the penalty. For God is exalted in power, wise.
Yes, it's such powerful language. Such poetry. Since that one was so lovely and we all enjoyed it so much, let's have another one.
The fire will burn their faces, and they will therein grin, with their lips displaced. Were not my signs rehearsed to you, and you but treated them as falsehoods? They will say, Our Lord, our misfortune overwhelmed us, and we became a people astray. Our Lord, bring us out of this. If ever we return to evil, then shall we be wrongdoers indeed. He will say, Be you driven into it with ignominy, and do not speak to me.
Oh, yes! The language is so powerful! You can viscerally feel the hatred and contempt of the evil God for all those people he created, and then forced into an eternity of torture. That's fucking metal. That's a running theme of the book, by the way. That God picks people out and then makes them not believe in him, and then makes it so they won't be able to start believing in him, and then tortures them forever because they didn't believe in him. And of course, the tortures have to be gleefully described in powerful detail. Hooray! You know, they didn't agree with us while they were alive, but at least they're going to be tortured forever after they're dead. That makes us feel a little better. Yay, torture! Powerful indeed. Muhammad was powerfully disturbed.
And this book is revealed at a time when the Arabic language itself was pretty much at its apex. There were, as we know, there were poets in Mecca and Medina at the time who could speak the most eloquent Arabic, tell the most fantastic stories. And one of the signs that the Quraysh used to try and show that they were number one was that they had the best poets.
Okay, so let's just add a little bit of clarity to the implications of what it is you're actually saying. So, the Arabic language at the time was at its apex, which means, I guess, that it was spoken with a little more flourish, a little more pizzazz than it is now. Lots of pizzazz, with pizzazz on the side. There was no shortage of pizzazz. Do not question God's pizzazz. Okay, so we already have a pretty decent baseline of Arabic here. And then you say there were poets in Mecca and Medina at the time who spoke the most eloquent Arabic. They told the most fantastic stories. No mention of written words, I suppose it was more of an oral tradition. And there was this aristocratic tribe in Mecca called Quraysh, who, according to you, used their badass spoken poetry to prove that they were the #1 tribe around. Sort of an early form of the rap battle, I guess. And within this tribe, there was a prominent clan called Banu Hashim, who were the caretakers of the pilgrimage to the Kaaba. This was Muhammad's clan, and it was led by Muhammad's grandfather. Muhammad's father died before he was born, and his mother died when he was a child, so he was raised by his uncle, who, it so happens, inherited leadership of the Banu Hashim clan from Muhammad's grandfather after he died, which was when Muhammad was about 8 years old. So Muhammad was raised from childhood by the clan leader. And Muhammad's preaching about the Quran, which is what led to his falling out with the Quraysh tribe and his leaving Mecca, didn't start until he was more than 40 years old. So all that time he was in this poet tribe, just absorbing the culture, which supposedly, according to you, was steeped in this stuff. It was how the tribe proved how great it was. And considering all of that, I'm supposed to be impressed that Muhammad was well-spoken just because he couldn't read or write? You know you don't have to be able to read or write to talk fancy, right?
And they actually used to send them to challenge Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Wow, it really was just like a rap battle. Although probably with beatboxing, because instruments are haram.
And the Quran issued to these men a challenge, because as we know, a lot of people tried to refute the Quran. It said, look, if you disbelieve, it's in Surah Al-Baqarah, if you don't think this book is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then all you have to do is create a surah like what's in this book. Just one chapter like what you see in this book. Because if somebody else can do it, that means it came from a man. If no one else can do it, that means it must have come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I've got a few things to go over here. I'll pick apart the nature of the challenge itself in a minute, but first, let's work backwards through the other claims. So, you say that if no one else can do it, that means it must have come from Allah, which totally discounts the possibility that maybe Muhammad's just the greatest rapper in the local region. Sorry, poet. Winner of the regional championship, on his way to competing in the All Arabia Rap Tournament. Sorry, poetry tournament, which isn't really that impressive when you consider that the population of Arabia as a whole was probably, like a couple 100,000 at most in those days? But yeah, point is, you don't need God to explain Muhammad being a better spoken word poet than the other guys. Especially when you consider that those other guys are coming to see him on his home turf, surrounded by his Muslim people, who are obviously going to side with him. And as we all know, who ultimately took over the entire area and wrote the history the way they wanted it. That tends to create just a tiny little bit of an advantage in how these things are perceived in the future. Okay, next statement, still working backwards. You said that if someone else could create a surah like what's in that book, that means it had to have come from a man. And that's also false. Let's say that it really did come from God, or whatever, the devil, the jinni, an angel. That alone would not imply that it's the best thing ever written, or even especially good. For all we know, God could be a terrible author. After all, as you accidentally implied in the previous video, the God of Islam is totally insane, which doesn't usually help to produce high art. But onto the most important part, because all of that stuff I just said ignores the biggest problem with what you've said, which is the nature and presentation of the challenge itself. The challenge is simply to produce a surah like one that's in the Quran. That's the complete extent of the wording. That's literally all it says. For example, Surah 10 verse 38 just says,
Or do they say he forged it? Say, bring then a chapter like it, and call to your aid anyone you can, besides God, if it be you speak the truth.
The problem here would be obvious to any neutral reader, but Muslims completely fail at their reading comprehension when it comes to this. Tim, you need to actually define what it means for a surah to be like one in the Quran. You need to define it very specifically and clearly so that there's no room for interpretation, which, by the way, is why those British law books have such dry, official-sounding language. Muhammad's powerful language lacks the clarity necessary for people to even understand what the fuck he's asking them to do. It provides zero criteria for what would qualify a surah as being like one in the Quran, and this is very likely deliberate, since then, no matter what anyone produces, Muslims can just claim, no, that wasn't like a surah in the Quran, no, you failed, it's from God. Nya, loser. Think carefully. What is the success case? What is the failure case? By what specific criteria will these be judged, and by whom? None of this is provided. None of it can be, because that would mean that those criteria could be met, and it would be clear and obvious that the challenge had been met, and that would be entirely unacceptable to the Muslims. They cannot have that. Their religious commitments and Muhammad's religious manipulation means that cannot be allowed. If someone tries it, and they write their own surah in the same style as one of the surah from the Quran, you can just say, well, it doesn't contain a true message from God, so clearly it's unlike any of the Quranic surahs. It's not miraculous. If they write a surah in the same style and with the same claims, but they just arrange it differently, you can say, no, that's not like a surah from the Quran because it lacks the beauty and perfection of the arrangement of the Quran. If they copy a surah and change a few of the words to synonyms, you can say they failed because the original word choices were much more elegant. Look at how well they expressed the ideas and how powerful they were. And besides, to even produce the thing in the first place, they're going to have to read a surah to get an idea of what their writing is supposed to sound like. And so no matter what they produce, you can just accuse them of copying the surah instead of creating something like it all on their own. Or if you feel lazy, you can just give no reason at all and just dismiss it by saying, no, that's not like the style of the Quran. Quran's better, and if your eyes and ears weren't closed, you would see that. Someone's writing could so perfectly capture the language and style and content of the Quran that it would be totally indistinguishable from an authentic surah if you put it in the Quran and gave the book to someone with perfect knowledge of classical Arabic but who'd never read the Quran. And even then, because of the wording of the challenge, there's always a way for you to worm your way out of admitting they succeeded. No matter how well they write, no matter how well they capture the style of the book without exactly copying it, the Quran's challenge is worded to make sure that you always have a way out. And because there's no failure case, that means the claim that the Quran is from God is not falsifiable using this challenge, and so the challenge is useless to verify the Quran's divinity. Which means that by its very nature, this challenge cannot be evidence.
Now I thought, okay, that's interesting. I wonder if anybody managed it.
Of course not. Do you seriously think Muslims are going to admit that anything ever written is as good as the Quran, especially when they have such an easy way to deny it? Give me a break.
I look into it. Of course, nobody did.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
There were many challengers who attempted it, but nobody did.
I gotta be honest, I'm surprised there were any challengers. After reading the terms of that challenge, they should have just gone, nah, that's rigged. I'm not wasting my time. They must have been either really stupid or really bored. Or fictional, I guess.
That was back then. How about more recently?
Same thing. It's not like the challenge is less rigged more recently.
And so if any of the brothers are familiar with Orientalism and some of the movements that took place when the British Empire and some of the colonial powers went into the Muslim world, what they tried to do was to cut the Muslims' relationship with the Quran. And the way they tried to do this was to meet this challenge, to disprove the Quran. So there are entire institutes that were set up to refute the language of the Quran and imitate it.
Okay, look, man. On its face, that's the most ludicrous claim I've heard in a long time, but I still took it seriously and I tried to figure out what you might have been referring to. I searched around for anything that might sound remotely similar to what you're talking about, some original source that you might have misunderstood or misrepresented, and I got someone else to try to find something too, and I asked the Masked Arab, who's an ex-Muslim Arab YouTuber, who you should definitely subscribe to, by the way, link in the description, if he'd ever heard anything like this claim from anyone before, and guess what? Nothing. Nothing remotely similar from any source I could find, Islamic or not. So here are the possibilities as I see them. Either you found something somewhere that you misread as severely as you misread the stuff about the Big Bang, and so what's coming out of your mouth is such a totally butchered version of the original that it's impossible to find the original based on it. Or you didn't actually find anything yourself, but you just heard it from some Muslim you know and you didn't bother to check it because, hey, Muslims never get things wrong, right? Or you made it up all by yourself to push your narrative. To me, it doesn't really matter much which one of those is true because they're all pretty bad, and in any case, you should be ashamed of yourself.
There are entire institutes that were set up to refute the language of the Quran and imitate it. None of them could do it.
Yeah, I would imagine so. It's hard to get much done when you're imaginary.
There were professors who were paid hundreds of thousands of pounds. They became Muslim because they couldn't do it.
Yeah, they also couldn't do it because they're also imaginary. And trust me, you don't want people to start expecting imaginary entities to do things, because otherwise they might start expecting your God to do things. And that would not go well for your religion.
So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, that's interesting.
You're looking at what and thinking it's interesting? The figments of your imagination? Seriously, dude, you need help. Tell your parents to get you help.
On the one hand, there's this infinite, flawless thing with a will of its own.
Which your only reason for believing in is that you completely fail to understand everything you read.
And on the other hand, we've got this book, which is so powerful. Even in English, it's unlike anything you've ever read.
Yeah, unless you've read Mein Kampf, I guess. Although, let's be fair now, Mein Kampf is way less obsessively hateful of the outgroup.
That virtually solves any problem you can come across.
I need to put a disclaimer here for public safety. Please do not attempt to solve your problems by the means described in the Quran. Logicked takes no responsibility for any negative consequences if you do.
And no one has been able to disprove that this is from God.
Were we supposed to be trying? I'm not really interested in trying to prove negatives to you, man. I mean, hey, you never know. Maybe that ridiculous clusterfuck of an origin with all of its human error and human interference was all planned by God right from the start. You never know. You better get along with actually proving it if you want smarter people than you to believe it, though.
I have these two things that I cannot deny. But I didn't take my Shahada.
Why's that? Was that persistent little voice in the back of your mind telling you, hey, something doesn't quite add up here. Maybe I should seek out some alternative points of view before I commit to anything, just to see if this really does make the most sense? Is that what was going on?
Because to me, it still felt alien. It felt unnatural.
Oh. Of course. Silly me, expecting you to have a smart reason for anything.
And I kind of backed off from the guys who I'd been chatting to. And then what happened, I backed off for about a month or so.
What did you do for all that time? Did you go back to pondering your issues with the standard work arrangement? Maybe work through some of that stuff? You know, the stuff that you were actually supposed to be concerned about? Or did you just sit around drooling on yourself?
And what happened then was that it was one lunchtime at work. And I sat down to have my dinner.
Yes, Americans, they eat dinner at lunchtime. Get some culture, you plebs.
And a Muslim guy sits next to me and a non-Muslim guy sits across the desk. And subhanAllah, I don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed him to start talking or what happened there, but he starts saying, to the Muslim guy, oh, you Muslims, you're so dense, why do you believe in God? There's nothing out there, it's stupid.
What, just like that? Straight out of the blue? Your workplace was weird, man. Maybe you really did talk to everyone about their religion if they're that candid.
And I thought, right, I'll stay quiet. And this is where the Muslim guy now, he'll start telling him that, look, there's an infinite origin, that what came at the beginning of everything, it's flawless, it's one. And there's the Quran, which issues, it has a linguistic challenge to mankind. Nobody's matched it. I thought, he's going to destroy this guy.
Oh yeah, bro, it's gonna be a ponage fest. He's facing down two of the lamest arguments in the history of religious apologetics. Nobody could possibly have anything to say to that. This guy's gonna pwn his stupid atheist face into the dirt. Grab your popcorn.
The Muslim says, yeah, but bro, haven't you seen trees? Like, clearly trees mean that there's God. This was his argument.
Huh. You know, now that you mention it, that's kind of a more compelling argument than any of yours.
And then he says to the guy, he says, look, it says Allah in your hand. This guy doesn't know a letter of Arabic. He's never seen Arabic in his entire life. He said, look, it says Allah in your hand.
Yeah, that's a terrible argument, not least because it actually does not say Allah on your hand in Arabic or any other language. I've seen that Adam Saleh video. One hand says 81, the other hand says 18, which makes 99, which is how many names Allah is supposed to have. It's not supposed to be Allah's actual name, and it's not supposed to be just on one hand. Even so, it's completely ridiculous, but at least it's a little bit less ridiculous.
And I thought, oh no, the non-Muslim guy, he started laughing. Understandably, he started laughing at this. And he said, that's why you're a Muslim.
Oh, I know how he feels all too well. Tim.
So I thought, look, this guy is getting murdered. I have to do something.
Tim, the super smart ex-atheist, to the rescue with his incredible, irrefutable arguments.
So I started to talk.
Oh, damn. Shit's about to get real.
And I went through the whole discussion that, there has to have been an infinite creator, that the Quran has never been beaten. And basically, as a non-Muslim, I proved Islam to another non-Muslim.
And everybody clapped and cheered, and the non-Muslim guy took his shahada right there on the spot. And your boss made you the employee of the month just because your arguments were so great.
The Muslim guy, bless him, didn't know what was going on. He was looking at us both like this.
Yeah, he was like, damn, I was just playing with my stupid arguments. But this idiot's actually convinced by this stuff. I gotta find a new job. The people here are crazy.
And so I basically go through the whole discussion, and at the end of it, the non-Muslim guy, he sat there and he thinks about it for a minute, and he goes, yeah, that's pretty interesting, but I don't really care.
Ah, right, okay. So it's not so much that you proved Islam to the non-Muslim guy. It's more that while you were talking, you were thinking, damn, I'm so awesome. Look how much I'm totally super poning this guy right now. So you thought you were like this. But the reality was more like this.
I'm going to live my life the way I want to live my life. So, do one, basically. And he stood up and he walked away.
Yeah, that's probably the best thing he could have done if he wanted to avoid hurting your feelings. Luckily, I don't have that issue.
And I sat there for a minute. The Muslim guy, he just kind of left. I don't think he knew what to say.
Yeah, you made the situation awkward, man. They didn't know how to tell you how ridiculous you were sounding without disappointing you, so what else were they supposed to do?
And I sat there on my own for a minute thinking about it, and I thought, man, this guy's an idiot.
Yes, Tim, you're not the dumb one. It's everyone else who's dumb. And that's why at school you had that special bus just for you. They knew you were too smart to ride with the other kids. You would have pwned all their faces off and made them feel bad.
I've just proven to him beyond a shadow of a doubt that this has to be true, and he hasn't accepted it.
I know, right? Everyone who hears that kind of spectacularly compelling evidence and doesn't accept it must just be a complete idiot. There is no chance that your arguments have a single crack or flaw at all. I mean, yeah, when you thought you were so smart as an atheist, you really weren't. But now that you're so smart as a theist, you're definitely so smart. And anyone who doesn't think so is a fucking moron.
And then it hits me that this is me. I know it's true. Why haven't I accepted it? So I went and I found the brother and I said, look, I think I'm ready. And the Friday after that was when I took my shahada.
And so ends the tale of Timmy, the super smart atheist who became a super smart Muslim. We can all take a lesson from this grim tale about the consequences of failing to think critically. Keep your wits about you, my friends. Our world is terribly low on people who do. And another thing you can do, my friends, is support me on Patreon. This channel is how I keep the lights on, after all. Oh, who am I kidding? I never turn the lights on. But it is how I keep the computer running. If you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe and thumb up the video, and I'll be back soon with something new.